Hello, hello.
Hello.
There he is. Hey,
There he
how are
is.
you? There he is. Oh, hey guys. I see
Hey.
you all. Hey everyone.
Hello.
Oh, it's truly my pleasure. Are you all actually in Tennessee right now, or are you all scattered to the winds?
Most of us are in Tennessee. We have a few students that are that stayed home, but they're still attending. So there's one guy from Alaska right now. We have a student from South America that she's still down there and singing virtually.
Crazy. Have you been singing together? Are you making virtual choirs or anything like that?
Well, we start virtually. Both semesters we've started virtually to kind of get everyone to learn the pitches, rhythms, everything good before we do come together, because our time together in person is so limited. It's 30 minutes in one space.
Oh, God.
So we did start that back a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah, do you know Leo Davis already? He's up here. He's the director of University Singers this semester.
I do indeed.
How are you, Ryan? Good to see you, Eric. Really a pleasure.
You as well. So good to see you.
Yes.
Eric, I'm Ryan. I am the interim director of choral activities and the associate dean for the college here. So we are super delighted to have you here. And we have other incredible guests here, some of our other ensemble directors. So we invited folks across the School of Music to come on into the University Singer Hour so that they could hear from you. And if you're okay, we can go to get started because we only have an hour, and I know everybody is dying to hear all of your great updates on your work, but also just kind of a little bit more background information about you besides what they might have known from singing your music all these years. So I'll start with the briefest bio that you will ever have read. This is Grammy Award-winning composer and conductor Eric Whitacre. His bio says is among today's most popular musicians. I'm going to actually say this has to be the most popular musician.
This is amazing. Keep going, Ryan. I could do this all
program worldwide, and his groundbreaking virtual choirs have united singers from more than 145 countries. Born in Nevada in 1970,
that's very nice.
Eric is a graduate of the prestigious Juilliard School of Music. He completed his second and final term as artist in residence with the Los Angeles Master Chorale in 2020, following 5 years as composer in residence at the University of Cambridge. So everybody give a virtual hello to Eric Whitacre.
Woohoo! Hey, everybody. It's so good to be with all you. Thank you, Brian, for having me. Truly. This is incredible.
Can I do a quick thing, Eric, just to see? Raise your hand, everyone, if you have performed one or more of Eric's pieces.
Oh, wow.
Just a few people here.
That's amazing.
Now raise your hand if you have had the pleasure to be conducted by Eric in an honor choir. So
have I worked with anybody? No.
There's one when you did the national honor choir for ACA a few years back. So, yeah.
What a great experience that was.
So, Eric, turn it over to you. Would you just talk to us about your journey in music?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I do that, Ryan, I should say, I was in Memphis. I was trying to figure out today when I was there last. I did a concert. I am embarrassed to say I don't remember how long ago that was, but I loved it. And this is a long way of saying, when we're through the pandemic, maybe we can do this all in person the way it ought to be done. So nobody graduate. So, Ryan, do you want me to kind of tell how I got in music and that kind of thing, and just how I came to be talking with all of you today?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, great. So seriously, I really want to maximize this hour, gang. So if any of this starts to get boring, put up the little Zoom hand or throw a shoe or something, just and we'll get to the more interesting stuff. Anyway, I was born in Nevada, which Ryan Are you from Nevada? Only Nevadans know how to actually pronounce it.
No, I've tried to respect Nevadans' insistence that we always say Nevada wrong. So
I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's how you know if somebody's from Nevada or not. And so a really small farming town, and I think when I look back on it, actually, well, let's start here. I'm like the dog from Up, squirrel, and in that I am endlessly fascinated by everything, just the world around me. And I just fall down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. My newest obsession is archery. I'm just convinced that's the way in the light. So I'm going to become an Olympic archer, I guess. But when I really look back on it, besides wanting to be a baseball player, what I was obsessed with was computers. And this is in the early 80s, like 1982, 1983. I'm 51 now. And at the time, nobody had a computer. It was a really new thing. And our middle school had gotten for the entire school district this Commodore 64. And I don't know if any of you are computer nerds and know what a Commodore 64 is, but the 64 stands for 64K of RAM. I mean, you couldn't even open an email on the thing now. And I would go in every lunch and I would program on this little computer. And I learned to program in what's called the BASIC language. It's basically what Bill Gates used to program DOS and to start that entire revolution. I just learned that code. And what I remember being thrilled about and still being thrilled about is this idea that you could write all of these elegant lines of code, almost like poetry, and then just hit a button and this mechanical flower blooms. I just find that fascinating and beautiful, this idea of machines that are beautifully constructed, all these different levels, and they just unfold at the touch of a button. And it was somewhere around that time that somebody introduced me to the idea of electronic music. I didn't read music at the time. We had a piano in the house, and so I could play by ear. But I had no formal training. But finding out that there was music, pop music, but also film scores were starting to be this way, and there were all these 70s bands that had written albums completely made with synthesizers and drum machines, which were really new at the time. That was it. Just combining these two loves, I was obsessed. And I got, of all things, cast in a nationwide McDonald's commercial when I was 14 years old. I'm not an actor at all. And I had heard this audition on the call for people on the radio, and I begged my mom to take me into Reno, which is the big town an hour away. And anyway, I ended up getting cast, and because of it, I made some money, and my parents made me put most of it away. But with the little bit of money they let me spend, I bought my first synthesizer and my first drum machine. And I spent, from ages 14 to 18, every waking moment in my room writing hundreds of pop songs and film scores for movies that didn't exist, and just these kind of electronic journeys. And I think if you would have asked me when I was 18 years old what I was going to do, I would have said, yeah, I'm going to be a pop musician and also an astrophysicist. Those are my two tracks. That's what I'm going to do. And I went to school in Las Vegas, which is the big state school in Nevada. There's only two of them, and it's the big one. It's also the one furthest away from my parents. And I auditioned for a music scholarship. And in the room for the audition, there's all the faculty members. And I came in and they asked, what instrument do you play? And I said, keyboards. I thought they meant so I meant synthesizers by keyboards. They thought I meant harpsichords and pianos. And they said, why don't you play something from your repertoire? And I had no idea even what the word repertoire meant. So I just said, well, I sort of improvised. So I sat down and played, and I didn't get a music scholarship. But in the room at the time was a man named David Weiler, who was in the second year of teaching choir there, a little bit like you, Ryan. I think he may have even been interim at the time. And he followed me out and said, why don't you come over to my office and sing for me? And I wasn't allowed to sing in the pop band that I was in high school because they said I sounded like Kermit the Frog. And so I was already mortified. And David handed me this score and he said, I want you to sing the bottom line. I'm obviously a bass with my low voice. I want you to sing the bottom line, and then I'll play the top three. And I remember him starting, and I couldn't even get through the first measure. It was just hieroglyphics to me. And then he said, can you sing this? And he played it for me. And the moment I heard it, then yeah, absolutely, I could do that. I just developed an ear over all those years. And he said, can you sing this? And he played something pretty thorny and strange, and I could sing it back to him. And I think that he recognized that I was eager and that I had definitely an ear. And also, now that I've been conducting choirs for so long, I think he just also recognized that I had a low voice and I was alive. Any choir directors will recognize that oftentimes it just takes a pulse, and that's all you need to get into the choir. And I think I satisfied those requirements. And so he convinced me to come and join the choir. I'd seen choir in high school. We had a madrigal group that did, like Henry VIII outfits and, sang like this and la, la, la. And there's just no way I was going to do that. But he was really persistent and made sure I understood that it wasn't that. Anyway, by the time I finally got going and signed up, it was about a week and a half into rehearsals. And so I walked in and we did the classic, massage the person to your left and to the right, back rubs and this kind of thing. And I've just never been more mortified for humanity in all my life. I just couldn't believe that human beings would do this voluntarily on a weekday. I'm sure I thought, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. Or maybe I'll make it through this hour and that's it. And then he said, all right, let's turn to the Kyrie. And I was raised without religion. I didn't even know what a Kyrie was. And I looked over the shoulder at the guy standing next to me, all right, page 10. And David steps up onto the podium and boom, and we launch into the Kyrie from the Requiem by Mozart. And, well, I don't have to tell any of you, you know exactly that moment, right? I'm sure every one of you have that piece where you were this person before that happened and you were this person after, that awakening that happened. And I just stood there trembling. I didn't sing at all. I trembled and I giggled and I had tears in my eyes. And I think it was the first time in my life that I felt part of something larger than myself. And I left choir utterly transformed. I was the world's biggest choir geek. And I joined all the choirs they would let me join. I got in men's glee and I became president of this choir social club. I also just became obsessed with classical music in general, and I would spend every day at the library. I remember taking Mozart down off the shelf and opening up the score and trying to figure out what is happening here, listening with the CD. And then next to Mozart was some guy named Mahler, on the shelf. So it's like, what's this all about? Oh my God. Just day after day of my mind exploding. And 3 years into my 7-year undergraduate degree, I got accepted to the small chamber choir, the chamber chorale they were called, right? So the elite group. I think there was only 24 of us. And David had this tradition with that group that was passed down from his high school director, which was at the end of every year, they would perform a different musical setting of the same poem, this little poem called Go Lovely Rose. And it's the perfect way to end a year. The final lines are, how small a part of time they share that are so wondrous, sweet, and fair. It's one of those classic, everybody holds hands and cries at the end of the choir. And there were like 5 or 6 musical settings then that existed, and David and his teacher, I guess, had just cycled through them year upon year. And I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll write my own version of this and give it to David as a gift, this man who had utterly changed my life. And so I did my best writing it. I had mostly learned to read music by then, but I still didn't quite understand harmonic spellings. I had to have somebody help me with especially because I think it's written in 6 and 7 sharps. I just didn't quite understand how to spell all that harmonically. But I even multi-tracked myself so that I could hear what it would sound like. Sounds like, when I listen to it now, it's like Jacob Collier on a really, really bad day. And I gave it to him, not thinking that he would have us sing through it, but he did. He made copies. He had everybody in choir sing through it. And I'll never forget that the sound of, well, actually, it's exactly like that computer program, that you spend all this time building this, what you hope is this elegant, tightly wound code, and then you just hit play and it unfolds in front of you. Except this way now, it's unfolding in the hearts and minds and souls of these people in the room with you. And that was it. That was the day that I knew I would be a composer. I didn't know how one does that, if it's even a career, but that was it. And while I was an undergrad, I wrote a couple more pieces. I wrote a piece called Cloudburst and a piece called Water Night. And I wrote my first band piece, a piece called Ghost Train. And it was, the pieces were getting shared around amongst conductors, which was really cool, especially on the West Coast, and people saying, wow, this is nice. And, are you writing more? And I thought, as I was nearing the end of my undergraduate degree, I should really go and get some proper training. Now I need to learn. I really need to learn. And I was told by my advisors that my grades were so bad that there was no graduate school in the country that would accept me, and that it was a good lesson for me. And so I went to the big book of graduate schools in the library and looked for any school that would accept my application without a GPA, just my portfolio. And the only place I could find was this place in New York called the Juilliard School. And so it's the only place I applied, and I got accepted. I did my master's degree at Juilliard, and then I moved out to Los Angeles, which is where I am now. And the idea, this was 22 years ago, I moved to LA thinking that I wanted to write music for movies, and I tried to make that happen, and I just couldn't catch a break. And all the while, I was writing music for choir and band, and then eventually orchestra. Ironically, I ended up writing a few film scores with Hans Zimmer, but 12 years later, totally unrelated to me trying to break into film. And that's it. I guess that's how I got my start, and how I'm with all of you good people here today.
So I think a lot of us view your compositional style as being something that was new. So I'm kind of curious, as you're doing it and you're still becoming musically literate, I think is kind of what you're saying in that undergraduate education, at least moving from what you understand in a sound world, that how to put it theoretically on a page. How did that even come to you? I mean, obviously the people you're citing are classical romantic type composers, but that's not the style that you're composing in. So where did that shift happen in how you became a composer?
I'm not sure. What's really funny is I can go back and look at the very first notes I ever wrote. So as a classical composer, and it's that piece "Go Lovely Rose" that I told you about, right? So can you all hear this? If I play this, is that coming through? I've got a little keyboard, great. So "Go Lovely Rose" starts, the entire choir is on the exact same note. They're all in this B. And then they sing. And basically what they do is they're just peeling away, right? So if you're an alto, you sing, and you just hold the third note. So that the first 5 notes are this cluster. And what I find fascinating about this now, looking back 30 years after I wrote it, is everything that I believe about choral writing, composition in general, is kind of encapsulated in those first 5 notes. And there's a bunch of stuff to unpack if you'll just go on the journey with me for 2 minutes here. So the first is that even before I found choir, I was obsessed with dissonance. And my earliest memory of this is I must have been 9 years old, maybe 8, and we had a shower at the house that when you turned it on would go like, you know, sometimes showers do that where it's just got this endless tone. And I can remember being in the shower and, you know, if that's the note, then I would sing just right under it, and I just listen to, right? And then I would slowly bend my voice up, and as you get closer, right, it goes, right? And even then, although I didn't name it this, I thought there was kind of like almost like a secret language or a hidden language, which I still believe. I believe that the music and the relationship of notes to one another is, at the very least, it's a sonic representation of the most beautiful and elegant governing laws of our universe. And that when we feel those things, they vibrate in us in what feels like a magical way. So once I started singing in choir, even before I wrote this piece, I would take all of my friends to racquetball courts or to stairwells with big reverbs, and I'd say, okay, you sing that note, you sing that note, you sing that note, you sing that, and then we'd all get in tune and then just giggle. Like I would just have frizzen, right? Wave after wave of, I know you all know what I'm talking about, right? Just that feeling where it's like, oh my God, it's in my body. And then the second piece that I wrote was this piece called Cloudburst, right? And Cloudburst starts with, I promise this won't go the entire hour, Ryan, but now I'm on a roll. So Cloudburst starts with the same chord, that Lydian chord, right? It's a totally different key from Go Lovely Rose, but it starts. And one night while I was composing, honest to God, my thumb just slipped and I played. And I added that sub. And I remember going, like it actually took my breath away. And the reason it took my breath away is because that combination of notes, it was no longer like Go Lovely Rose where I just felt something. It actually felt unbelievably specific. It felt, those notes matched the way I feel about the natural world and rain specifically. This sense of wonder and awe seemed to be embedded in that very group of notes. And then that became kind of a lifetime of trying to find the right combination of notes that elicit a very, very specific emotional reaction. So like later on I wrote a piece called A Boy and a Girl, and there's a chord where they sing Giving Silence. Right? So on silence, that sounds to me like melancholy and nostalgia and a little bit of sorrow with just a touch of hope up top. It's incredibly specific emotionally. And what I've been doing year upon year is just building a lexicon of words. So for instance, in Water Night, which I wrote after Cloudburst, there's a moment where it goes, eyes of dream water. So they sing, eyes of dream. So on that chord, water, it's exactly the same chord as Cloudburst. So it's just the water chord. So I just quote myself. It's like, oh, I already figured out the word for water, the musical word. So great. Every time I come to water, it's going to be a version of that. And over the years, I just populated my pieces with these new words that I had learned. And I think it also kind of creates a bit of an echo chamber, right? So you end up with a style, which I didn't intend, but somewhere along the way, I became the cluster guy. And so anyway, so that's that long way. Then, and I promise, Ryan, I will finish, is just that this idea of starting Go Lovely Rose, just like that, is that there's two things. One, it's unbelievably pragmatic. If this were the first chord, like that we all had to sing this, there's no way as a not very good singer I'd be able to find my way into that cluster. Maybe now I could, but probably not. But I absolutely know that if all I have to do is sing the first note and hold it, easy, right? And so I spend a lot of time crafting these cluster chords that are pretty easy to get into, right? Either your line goes up and into them, or you're all in a major triad and half of you stay and half of you move, right? So that it's a very pragmatic solution to the sound. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, so let's stop there for a minute then.
It's those aspects of your composition, though, that from an educator's perspective allows us to use concepts, like diatonic scale, we build from here, solfege with me. Like I broke down, I remember we were doing, I think you got For Most This Amazing Day, probably still one of my most favorite pieces of yours. And the component that's the hardest part of where it builds, we were having so much trouble. So I just said, okay, well, let me be an educator. Let me just break this down and talk about solfege and using and they were able to get it so much more easily than trying to just read it out of context, So I think I've always been able to appreciate that you intentionally did that so that it isn't this composer wizardry of trying to make us feel bad about ourselves as musicians. But you're not making us do like Britain's War Requiem or something where you just have to do it. So I'm always appreciative of that. So you're unique as a composer because some composers, they like to just stay in their lane, right? I've brought in composers before and said, would you like to work with the choir? And they just freeze up. They're like, no. I'll be happy to make comments, but they don't want to stand in front. But you've easily made that transition, but you've actually pushed the choral art into integration with media and all sorts of things, I think really, my words, to provide more access to the choral art than maybe was ever given before. So how did that happen in your journey?
Well, you're partly talking about virtual choir, but maybe plus, right? Yeah, so I think part of it comes from that insatiable curiosity that just at some point it's like, all right, what else can we do with this? Like we did that. Let's try this. Let's, like how can you bend the rules? I remember I wrote a piece called Deep Field, and Deep Field it's it's got a massive orchestral. It starts with like 17 minutes of orchestral music, and then there's a moment where I turn to the audience and I do this as conductor. And what's happened is everybody's pre-downloaded on their phone an app, and they all just push play on their phone at the same time. And from it comes this fly through of deep space. The whole piece is an homage to the Hubble telescope. But then from each phone is coming this little shimmering sound, which on its own doesn't sound that interesting when you download the app and play it. But when you have 2,000 people playing that, and then what I do is I ring the choir around the audience, orchestra on stage, and then all of these phones shimmering out here, it really dissolves what the stage is, right, and the audience, that it becomes a more communal experience. And I think that's always my goal, is how can you make a more communal experience? I'm not so interested in music that that it just makes you go meh, or like you said, where you work so hard at it and then you get to the end and you're like, why did we work so hard on that? You know what I mean? Like I want music that reaches out and grabs me by the lapels and pulls me in and says, look at this, come on, we're going to change your life. And so oftentimes what's needed for that then is something to shake it up a little bit, something different, right? In terms of using technology, I just always think about it as it's just the tools we have, right? It's the gun on the table. Do you all know the Chekhov gun on the table idea? It's the playwright Chekhov, right? He said, if you put a gun on the table in Act 1, then you better use it by Act 3. So I always feel like technology is it's a prop on the table. So it's here. It's like a piano. It's like a voice. Then let's use it as a method of expressing and creating.
I want to get to some of the questions that the students provided before. Before that, though, one of my colleagues, the director of bands, Albert Wynn, who I think is with us. Albert, you in there?
I am.
Hey, Albert.
Hey, Albert.
He asked, how are you using your platform to promote composers from underrepresented populations?
It's a fantastic question, and to be honest, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm not sure how best I can serve that. There's absolutely no question that something has to change, and I want to be part of that solution. I don't know yet. I mean, I've got a bit of a social media platform, so absolutely I can highlight composers from those populations. Maybe that's helpful. I'd like to do something more substantial and more systemic, to be honest. There's got to be a much deeper way in. I'm not sure what that is yet. I'm open to any and all ideas.
Thanks. Andrew, one of the University Singers members, he asks, why is Godzilla Eats Las Vegas so good?
That is such a dumb piece. So for those of you who don't know this piece, it's a piece that I wrote for concert band. It's called Godzilla Eats Las Vegas. And the way that it came about is I just started at the Juilliard School, and the way it works for the composition program is that each semester, at the end of each semester, you come and you meet with the composition faculty. And it's pretty intimidating. Also because I remember at the time, 3 of the composers, Milton Babbitt, John Corigliano, and David Diamond, were literally answers to questions I had taken during my senior finals as an undergrad. I was like, oh my God. It was very intimidating. And basically, I'd come in and I was writing a lot of music for choir and concert band music. And they said to me, you need to be working on serious music. And I think what they meant was a string quartet or a piano quintet or an opera or something. And I just have an infantile response to authority. And so my response was to come in the next semester with Godzilla Eats Las Vegas, which is just such a dumb piece. But thank you for saying that it's great.
Jose asks, while working with Spitfire Audio and creating your Eric Whitacre choir, what was it like to record in Air Studios and work on such a huge project with all the people involved?
Oh my God. A dream upon dream. Who asked that, Ryan? Did you say Eric? Was his name Eric?
Jose.
Oh, Jose, sorry. I'm not that self-involved, I promise, Jose. Did you say Eric? Was his name Eric? Malkovich? No, so for those of you who don't know what Jose is asking about, I made this sample library, which is basically you can download all the sounds of my professional choir in London and then play them on your keyboard. You can compose with them. And they were recorded in a studio that's called Air Studios, which is, that alone, Jose, is the most mind-bending experience. Yeah, Air, it's like a temple. It's the most beautiful sound. I'd say 1/3 of all film scores are recorded there. 1/3 are recorded at Abbey Road, and 1/3 are recorded here in Los Angeles. And so even just stepping in there and clapping your hands, it sounds like movies, I know that sounds crazy, but you think, oh my God, I actually know this space. I grew up in this space in a way. And it was owned and operated by George Martin, who was the producer of the Beatles, the fifth member of the Beatles, if you will. And so all over the place, just in random places, is Beatles memorabilia, but originals, right? So like, oh, there's his string quartet arrangement of Yesterday that's on the album, or just crazy stuff like that. And then recording the sample library it turned out to be this bizarrely spiritual experience, because the idea with the sample library is that let's say you start with the ooze, right? And so you start at the lowest range, and you got the bass is all singing, ooh, they're all just singing, ooh, you get that, and you go, okay, now E, ooh, right? And you just go up, note. You get all the way through the ooze, which takes several hours. Great, now let's go back and do all the ahs. Now the E's. Now let's do the piano. Now let's do the forte. It could be mind-numbing, but somehow the singers and I found this kind of weird, it was kind of a meditation, for lack of a better word. You have to be so focused and so in tune to hearing the other people around you and having this perfect blend that time sort of ceases to stop. And it took us 13 days to record the entire library. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I look back on it as some of the most special days of my performing career. I know that sounds crazy, but it's just a beautiful place to live in that sound space.
Holly asks, where do you find your inspiration, or how do you feel inspired? How do you approach writing choral works versus art songs?
It's funny about inspiration. I think there's two levels to the inspiration. So the one's more the movie version, which absolutely exists, which is like talking about the Hubble telescope. Or I wrote this piece called Leonardo Dreams of His Flying Machine. And that's directly inspired by reading about Leonardo da Vinci and the physics of flying and the idea of the, this golden renaissance of reasoned mind. And all of that then it sort of takes my breath away. It's a world that I want to be in. It's a movie that they haven't made well enough yet, or a novel that I haven't read, or a Spotify playlist that doesn't exist. And I want to dive into the middle of that and just swim in that world. That's that big inspiration. And frankly, that's the fun inspiration, because at that point, the piece that you're going to write, you haven't started suffering yet. And so it's only aspirational. It's like, what a great idea. This is going to be amazing. It's a quick descent into madness after that. But the other kind of inspiration then is smaller and in a way more beautiful, because it's in the micro details of the piece, that when you're working down on the cellular level and you're trying to make big macro ideas echo with small micro ideas, and all the while you're cutting away fat from the piece and saying, nope, too much. Nope, don't try to dazzle. Nope, be honest. Nope, be truly honest. Nope, here's the limitations of your own skills. Nope, judges. Nope. You just you have to get to the core of it. And at some point, all that's left is this idea, and how do they meet? And oh my God. And there's this connection that happens. And that is so inspiring. It's so electric, that moment. But it's quietly electric, as opposed to the movie electric. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Holly, does that answer your?
Yeah. Thanks, Holly.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Carmen, she asks, what would be your advice for students? Something you wish you had done or you did that impacted your musicality and career?
If I could go back and talk to 18-year-old me, the first thing I would say, and I would say this so loudly until 18-year-old me listened, although knowing 18-year-old me wouldn't listen to anything, even future me, but I would say, you need to spend a year abroad, period. It's easy to make happen. There's all kinds of programs that do this kind of thing. Go and live with a host family. Also, go somewhere where they don't speak English or whatever your chosen language is. Go somewhere where you're in the south of France, you don't speak a word of it, and you're going to come home and you'll speak French for the rest of your life. That is such a beautiful gift to yourself. And B, you're going to expand your mind 10 times over. I really wish I would have done something like that. I even had the opportunity to do it and didn't do it. I would say that to every student. When you're in the middle of it, it seems like a 4-year degree and then this and the job in my 20s. And you don't realize until you're much older, it's like, you got all the time in the world. Everything's going to take care of itself. Don't worry about it. Degree schmagree. Go live. Go live a little bit. You know, in the UK and much of Europe, they take this gap year, right? You finish high school and then they take an entire year off and they just backpack all over Europe or do whatever. I really think people should do that. The other thing I would say to my other self, again, probably wouldn't hear this, but you have this incredible window of time in your life from the time that you're about 17 to probably your late 20s, I guess. But especially, like your early to mid 20s, when you have a kind of superpower in that you have all of this excitement, you have all of this energy, you don't know anything, and you think you do know things. That's amazing. That is an amazing place to be, because what you'll do then is you just take all kinds of risks, all kinds of chances. You just throw yourself into things that you just have no business being in, and you'll say yes to things that are like, yeah, sure. What's the worst that could happen? It's not that turns off later on in life, but there's just something about that time that is you just got this window of opportunity. And I know from experience that window, it doesn't close, but it becomes much, much more difficult to climb through without being aware of what you're doing. And so I think for people your age, what I would say is, well, actually, there's this beautiful improv. I don't know if any of you are actors or improvers. I only know this because my wife does it. But in improv, the idea is yes and. So, right, if somebody comes on a stage, it doesn't matter how absurd a thing they say. If they say, my car just hit a water buffalo, a bad improver will say, but there's no water buffaloes around here, or you don't even have a car. They'll try to shut down the reality of the weirdness that's come in. A good improver will say, well, I better get my towel, right? Or whatever the thing is. Like, you just accept the reality and go. And in this window in your life, what I would do is just say yes. Whatever crazy opportunity comes your way, especially as we get out of this pandemic stuff, just say yes. You can't imagine the paths that will unfold in front of you the moment you take that first positive step.
University of Memphis does not endorse taking a gap year. Just throw that out. Should have done it.
Terrible for choral programs. That's true.
Brent asks, how do you feel about your music being sampled for new creative projects?
I think it's the coolest thing ever. I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, every time I hear it show up in some little piece of electronica, or a few years back, somebody did like a hardcore metal version of Milk Sarumque. You can find it online. It's gent for, if any of you are metalheads and know that style, but and proper like Scandinavian gent, like, and they did the entire thing in Latin, full metal. Every bar is there. I find it thrilling. I think all of this stuff is supposed to be shared and sampled around, and anything to keep the conversation going.
I should probably be listening more deeply, but I'm still struck by what you said in the very beginning of your audition. Would Eric Whitacre be accepted into a music program now?
It's a really good question. No, I don't think I would have. I got lucky because I went to Vegas and they had a really new music school, and I think, well, also I didn't start as a music major, right? I think it took a year of classes before I was able to declare, or maybe two before I was able to actually declare it as a major. But absolutely not with the skills that I had at the time. No, there's no way. What's funny to me about that is that I think my story now is not so unusual for this new generation. I think lots and lots of people are growing up without much classical, training. How often you meet somebody who's been playing violin since they were 4? It doesn't really work that way anymore. And people are coming from all kinds of backgrounds, right? From pop and rock and musical theater and gospel, and you just don't know where they're coming from. And that's a superpower, I think. It gives you a really fresh approach to what you're doing. It's a super interesting question.
What's Eric Whitacre working on now? What's the next chapter? So you finished up with your artist residency. What should we be looking for in the next few months, few years?
Well, that's a good question. You'd think I would have been composing this whole time with all my free time, but it's only recently. I just got my first jab so I got the first round of my vaccine, and I was not prepared for how hopeful it made me, and realizing how dark a place I'd been in. I'm sure you all know exactly what I'm talking about. But then I suddenly realized, okay, I think there might be a light at the end of the tunnel here. But before that, it was really, really difficult to compose. There was no blood flowing to the muscle at all. So to be honest, what I've been doing is I'm going to make a video series. I've started a virtual school, and I'm going to teach a master class in composition and creativity. And you can see behind me, right, with all the lights. This is my garage that I'm in, by the way. But so honest to God, what I've been doing is I'm looking at my phone because I want to show you all something. I've been learning about cameras, and I'm going to do all this here in my own garage, but lighting and cameras. And okay, is everybody ready for this? Watch this. So watch behind me. Oh, really? But what about? Oh, this is what I've been doing with my time. but I have to say, like, I feel energized and electric from it again, and it's not because of cameras or teaching or any of that. I'm really convinced that the whole key to it is to approaching every day with a beginner's mind. That even if you're doing something you've been doing for years and years and years, to approach it like you've never seen it before. Every time it's new, it's fresh, it's interesting. And when you enter that world with this sense of fascination, it's just a beautiful way to go through life, I think.
I'll say it while it's in my head right now, Eric, because it seems like every year we kind of ask students, what are the choral pieces you like doing, or what's some of your favorite? And even in the 2000s, in 2020, the first thing that still comes to mind, as if I've gone back to the late 1990s, is Eric Whitacre's pieces. And it's not just to blow sunshine. It is that your music has connected for decades with students, that many of them, it connected them firmly in the choral art. And they still haven't found a replacement. Like, they're embedded in falling in love with choral singing because of your works, and that's pretty phenomenal. I think that some people have had that reaction with the Mozart Requiem or Beethoven or things like that. So thank you for actually getting people, because traditional ensembles could really be torn apart right now because there are so many different things that people can have access to. I mean, my daughter can learn to play the ukulele in her room on YouTube. So, yeah. But people are still being drawn in because of your music. So thank you for that. And I'll pass over to Leo. Leo, you got some questions for Eric?
Thank you. No, I wanted to allow the students to have Ryan. Thank you so much. I just want to thank you, Ryan, and Meg. Meg has been just a joy to work with and to make you the best. Accessible. we deeply appreciative of it, and I'm of course appreciative to Ryan, Dr. Fisher, for just his support in making this happen. So we just thank you. It's great.
Thank you.
Just a trendsetter, and that's what we need. We need a trendsetter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leo. Thank you, Ryan, too, for your
talk to us about this past year. So you've been inspired. It sounds like. How have you kept your sanity during an insane time?
Well, if I'm being completely honest, not well. This year sucked. I really struggled. I don't know how many of you can really relate to this. I mean, it's, might as well not put any flowers around it. I did not realize how being with people is oxygen for me. That and in the absence of that, how there's just parts of my being that are withering. I'm so glad that we seem to be on the way out of it, because I just don't know how much longer I can take it, to be honest. I've been endlessly inspired by people who have figured out how to keep going, especially teachers. I'm just amazed, even what you're doing, Ryan, here, that you're somehow keeping it all going and keeping everybody together under the worst possible conditions, especially for our art. It's like, what are we doing, right? Even the virtual choir is like, it's kind of choir, not really. And yeah, so I've also tried to look at the beautiful sides. My wife gave birth to a baby boy. I've got a 15-year-old son, but I now have a 4-month-old boy too. And so that's been gorgeous. And I literally haven't left Los Angeles in a year. Haven't seen my parents in a year. I'm sure you all have a similar story. And in some ways that's surreal. And in some ways that's so beautiful. If I never had to see an airport again as long as I live, I don't think I would be upset about that. And I've been able to stay home, be with my family. Yeah, it's been a tough year.
So I think that I don't know if you classify yourself. I would classify you as an entrepreneur. And so I think that a lot of our students, really, to have successful careers within the music field, I think are going to need to be entrepreneurs. And I'm curious, just through your own experience, what are some of the skills that you think our students maybe need to start working on or developing that will allow them to be successful in an ever-changing, evolving world, to try to push on to the next thing, the next idea, and give life to it?
It's a big question. I'm not sure that people need to be entrepreneurs in order to do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I think of myself as an entrepreneur, other than I think of myself as incredibly curious. And also, when you're a musician or any professional artist, you realize quickly that you're going to have to improvise a career, and you're going to have very few people just do the one thing. Really, you're going to do 7 things or 12 things and try to keep all these plates spinning. And for me, it was always, what exactly do I have to do so that I never have to have a real job? What does that take? And that's still my motto, by the way, is just, okay, oh, yep, great, I can try that, I can do. And so, to your initial question, Ryan, I still believe, actually, that when it comes to music or the arts, this is what works. This is what works every single time. You've just got to be authentic. You have to be authentic. And the thing is, it's not the movie version of authentic. It's authentic really sucks when you're being totally vulnerable. You got to be crazy honest with yourself, with your own limitations, with your own vanity. You've got to cut through all of that and just be authentic. Because as an artist, when you're being authentic, that speaks directly to people. It cuts through all the noise. And my God, is there a lot of noise now? Like you said, Ryan, with all the technology and everything going on. And then the other things, which will sound, this is going to sound lighter than it's supposed to, but is, if you show up on time, know what you're doing, and are lovely to work with, you can't imagine how far that's going to take you in any field, but especially the arts. those things, and then I'm not sure you have to be so entrepreneurial. You just have to want the thing, and be good to people. It's actually a pretty simple equation, I think, at the end of the day.
This is another example of a person in the arts who doesn't identify themselves as an entrepreneur yet. I think Joe Hansen is here. He's one of our music ed professors, and he is an expert on arts entrepreneurship. And I think it's amazing, because if you were in the business world, you'd definitely call yourself an entrepreneur. Created all of these things. You brought life to so many things. You're an independent musician, right? I mean, you aren't hired by someone to do your thing. You built your own kind of empire off of your product, your ideas. So to me, that's probably the best example of a successful entrepreneur in the arts.
Thank you, Ryan. I guess part of it is too, though, like I feel like we're all members of the same tribe. So all of us have funky brains, and all of us think creatively and weird and to the left. You know what I mean? So our whole community is about just wacky thinking. I only feel like an entrepreneur when I go and speak to business people, for example, right? And they want to know, how do I learn to be creative? It's like, well, I don't know. Start by being depressed. Now try to avoid work. It really helps if you had some sort of incredibly complex upbringing where your family is, there's some dynamic that is still plaguing you today with your parents.
There's a void in you you're trying to fill. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The void you're trying to fill. There you go. No.
So, yeah, I didn't know about the new normal. Congratulations! Wow.
Thank you.
That's like starting over, isn't it?
Yeah, it's man, oh man.
I'm like, my son is 15, and I'm seeing the light, like life after children being home, and you just rebooted, man. You rebooted.
Yeah, it is a reboot. So like I said, I've also got the 15-year-old son, and there is a path where it was like, oh wow, we're almost to the end, and then having a new baby is. You just can't believe how hard it is to not sleep. You can't believe you ever did it before. Do you know what I mean? This kid does not sleep, and it's brutal. I'm convinced he's trying to take us out. That he can't even walk, so he can't actually take us out, but he can do so by attrition. And I'm 51, so I'm easy pickings. I figure I've got another couple weeks left before I'm completely gone. But my wife is younger, and so I think he's working harder on her. It's like Colin Robinson from. Do any of you watch What We Do in the Shadows? It's like Colin Robinson, just an energy vampire sucking the life force from us.
How have you found? Maybe let's imagine with the 15-year-old. I don't know if you can think clearly about with a 4-month. How have you done work-life balance, or is because you're not your traditional 9-to-5 job? Have you always it's always been together? It's always work and life, not work versus life.
I struggle with it, to be honest. It's so much better now that I'm not traveling. You can imagine. It's so. For instance, my son, the 15-year-old, those are his basses behind us. He's a bass player. He's a jazz bassist, and he's really good. And so what we do is we just come out here to the garage and we jam all the time. I'll sit at the piano, he plays, and it's a dream. It's an absolute dream to be together like that. When I was traveling, there's just no easy way to do it, to balance the family and the life on the road. And I try to find the balance all the time. And then, a gig comes up or there's a certain travel schedule, and then it's this, and it's not easy.
And it will never be easy now that you have a 4-month.
Yeah. Although, I feel guilty for saying it, but I did have the thought within the last week, like, when do I get to travel again?
You're making up a gig. Yeah, I've got
exactly. That's a COVID thing. I don't know. I have to be in Istanbul. I'll be back in.
It's a Zoom meeting, but I have to be in Memphis to do this.
Exactly.
We'll gladly let you hide out in Memphis. We'll find.
Yes. We have to do this. I'm really serious. I'd love to come back. I love the city. I love the the history. I like my wife's from Belgium. She's never seen it. I'd love for her to experience.
We can make it work. This is my virtual background is our new lobby of the music center that's being built right now. So
really, this is a good time to build a music center during this. That's great. So you come back to
it. Students surprisingly are not complaining about the lack of parking because we've taken over a complete parking lot. So it's like somehow the best time for students to not be blowing our emails up about how they took 2 hours.
Amazing.
Any kind of parting words in our last 5 minutes together? Words of advice or words of inspiration, or just anything that's kind of on your heart right now?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, Ryan. So I talked a little bit about this in this thing that I did with ACDA a couple days ago, where students. How many of you are music majors, by the way? Oh, so almost everybody is. Wow. Well, even those who aren't music majors, I think this will apply to you, but you really, really, really have to know this is not the way this is supposed to be. This is not the way it's supposed to be. That it's now been a year, and some of you are young enough that a year is a substantial part of your life. I mean, my God, if you're 18, then it's been your entire adult life. You've been trapped in a room and meeting people on Zoom like this. And it's just not how it's supposed to be. That it's not only about learning, but there's a transformation that happens when you're all together and either making music together or just spending time watching other people, being inspired by what people do, trading ideas. So just if you can, as you despair, and I'm assuming every one of you reaches that moment at some point or broke a long time ago where you're like, I just can't do this anymore. Know that this is temporary and that we're working our way through it, and that when we get on the other side, I actually think there's going to be this golden age of, especially for music and choral singing, because I think people now know how much they need it, how desperate they are for it. And I think the arts organizations are going to flourish. I think it will be an opportunity for all of you to do exactly what you want to do, which is to go out and change the world with your music. The other thing I want to say is about the teachers and just about that, as bad as it is for all of you students, that the teachers have it bad in a different way. This is not what they signed up for. I know lots of teachers who are mortified. I mean, mortified to even be on camera. And the idea that they have to get up every day and be on camera like this and deal with technology that they don't understand or have a really hard time with, especially with younger people who have a much easier time with it, and try to do all the things that they want to do as teachers, which is to change you. There's that beautiful Buddhist saying, which is, may I be a bridge, a boat, a raft for all who wish to cross the water. That's why teachers do what they do. They don't do it for the money. They don't do it for the fame. They do it because they are called to do it. They are born teachers. And then to have all of that taken away from them, all those tools, especially in music, I think teachers probably aged way more than a year this year. And so what I would say to all of you students that are listening is take just a moment in the next day or two and reach out to a couple of your teachers. Just write them a sentence or two. Just say, what you're doing matters. What you're doing helped. What you're doing changed me. You can't imagine the impact that will have on these people who are dedicating their lives to helping you become the people that you're going to be.
Ooh, wow. That touched me. That's deep. Yeah. Thank you, Eric. What a great way to go out. I'm going to make you go out actually with fastest response. What are you listening to right now? And please don't say classical music.
No, I never listen to classical music. I'm listening to Hamilton for the 9 millionth time. Yeah, I was able to put it away. Hamilton ruins my life. This is a true story. I don't know if any of you are like this, where it's so catchy that I actually can't sleep when I go down a Hamilton rabbit hole. You get like some phrase stuck in your head. So the American experience, we get friends all scattered to the wind, right? And it's like just stuck in your head. And but recently, I've been taking my son on these long walks, trying to get him to sleep, and it's exactly about a 2-hour loop. It's the perfect Hamilton length. So every day, I'm going out and listening to it. By the way, just as a tiny side note, any of you who haven't caught the Hamilton hype yet, it lives up to it times 90, times 9,000. To me, it's the greatest work of art in any genre, maybe in the past 20, 25 years. It's so unbelievably good and layered and rich and important. Anyway, that's what I've been listening to, Ryan. That and a bunch of Stevie Wonder.
Cool. Can't go wrong with Stevie.
No, you can't.
There are some Hamilton haters in here. We won't out anybody, but
Hamilton haters. How can you be a Hamilton hater?
I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't understand.
Oh, that's sad. That's sad.
Everybody, please join me in thanking Eric Whitacre for this incredible hour with him. It's been a highlight of the semester. So thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me. Thank you,
and Leo. Thank you for setting this up, Leo. You're the best.
Yeah, truly.
Really a pleasure. Really a pleasure.
Thank you. And for all of you, let's 1 year from now. Is it springtime in Memphis yet, or is it better to come in April or May?
I love April. It was beautiful last week. Now this week it's in the 50s. So
yes.
April.
Let's do April, next April in Memphis. All right. Nobody graduate. Promise me. Thank you all. Be well, okay? Be well.
Bye, everybody.
Yes.
Awesome, Eric. That was so good. Thank you.